Okay. Good evening. Welcome to February's meeting of the Calumet Nature Exchange. Please advise if an Indiana teacher wishes to earn professional development credit. I am recording this evening's session and it will be available on Ollie's website within a week. The agenda calls for self-introductions followed by tonight's speaker, Dan Spencer. Q&A session will follow his presentation. So I'll introduce myself first. I'm Michael Bowes. I'm Executive Director of the Association for the Wolf Lake Initiative. And Mary Ann.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann Kozlowski. I am the site steward for Eggers Grove on the east side.
Okay, and June Webb.
Hi, I'm June Webb. I'm the site steward at Kickapoo Woods.
All right. And Susan?
Hi, I'm Susan Duncan, just a citizen, resident of Whiting, Indiana.
All right. And Marnie?
Hi, let me put my video on here. Hi, I'm Marnie Baker. I'm a steward at Orland Grassland, and I always like to come to these. They're always so educational. And it just so happens that Dan is our ecologist, so I'm here to support him too.
Okay. Stephen Pearson?
Actually, it's Pat, and I'm just a citizen that just loves this kind of stuff and learning about the Calumet region.
All right.
Thank you.
And Lisa?
Good evening. Hi, I'm Lisa Soa Downs. I volunteer with Cub Scout Pack 773. You might have seen us visiting one of your nature preserves in the area. I also volunteer with the Headwish Times, and I also, involved with Ollie and other things in the community. So live here in Headwish all my life.
Yeah, she's so busy you can never find her. And Laura Milkert?
Sure. Good morning or good evening, everybody. I have my kids here with me, so I'm going to have my camera off, and I'm just really looking forward to hearing what you're up to, and nice to see some familiar faces. I work with the Field Museum in the Calumet region and live on the far south side as well.
All right, so let's get started with Dan Spencer. He's a member of Ollie's board of directors. He's also is a Southeast Regional Ecologist for the Forest Preserve District of Cook County. And he will talk about his areas of concern, especially the Powderhorn Lake Nature Preserve. He has been involved in ecological restorations for the Calumet region for the past 10 years. Dan?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me tonight and allowing me to speak for a little bit. So I'm just going to try sharing a PowerPoint presentation here, and I hope that works. Looks like it's working.
There you go.
And can everyone hear me okay, I hope?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So, oops. Here we go. All right. So as Mike mentioned, I am a regional ecologist for the forest preserves of Cook County. And just to explain a little bit, there's my email address if anyone wants it, and I can, of course, share it, or other contact information if anyone has questions after this presentation. So, there we go. All right. So I just wanted to briefly explain how our ecology section at the Forest Preserves of Cook County works. There are 5 ecologists and 1 senior ecologist, and each one of us is assigned to a different region, as you can see illustrated on that map on the right. My region is the Southeast. There's some pictures there in the upper left-hand corner. That's my colleague Craig Billington doing some vegetation monitoring. And in the foreground is Monica Mueller measuring the DBH of a tree. The southeast region encompasses about over 19,000 acres of forest preserve land. The forest preserves of Cook County is about 70,000 acres in size altogether, which is about 1/10 of the total land area of Cook County. So we're the largest county forest preserve, I believe, in the United States. But the southeast region is, of particular importance, I feel, in that about a third of our, about 28%, almost a third of all of our holdings are located in the southeast region. This is a map of Cook County, aerial map, and these green areas indicate the locations of all of the forest preserve properties. As some of you may already know, in 2015, the Forest Preserves adopted a Next Century Conservation Plan, which basically was an outline of our goals for restoring and managing the preserves for the next 100 years. This was followed by our Natural and Cultural Resources Master Plan and our Prioritization Plan in 2017, which basically prioritized the top 30,000 acres of all of our holdings, which is, as you can now see, indicated in red on this map, that we believe are the highest quality and the highest priority for ecological restoration throughout Cook County. And we also delineated 15 landscape units. You can see them numbered there, those red polygons, across the preserves. And these are our top 15 highest priorities for ecological restoration based off of things like vegetative quality, Illinois natural areas inventory assessments, whether they're dedicated Illinois nature preserves or not, the size and continuity of them, and the presence of endangered or threatened species and that sort of thing. And what I'd like to note is that 6 out of our 15 areas of highest conservation priority occur in the southeast region. Of that 19,000 acres in this region, over 11,000 of those acres are part of our highest priority areas. So 37% of our highest priority areas occur just in the southeast region. So it's an important area. I'm just going to now go over some of the projects that we have going on right now in the southeast region. I'll probably only have time to touch on a handful, although there are several more, of course, than what I'll be covering tonight. The first one I'd like to talk about is actually not in the Calumet region, but a little bit further to the west and northwest at Tinley Creek Ravines, which is located in Tinley Park and Oak Lawn. Tinley, the map on the left shows the 1938 aerial photo of the area of the site. Those white polygons with those little letters and numbers indicate where our natural communities are. And then the map on the right is a more current aerial photo of the site with those same management units overlaid. So you can kind of look at them for comparative purposes. As you can see in the left-hand map, the historic map, a lot of this area was in some sort of agricultural use in the earlier 20th century. Whereas in the more current map, you can see more wooded areas, for instance. many of those old agricultural areas, once they became part of the preserve system, were reforested in the 20th century. But one thing I will point out, which is of significance here, is that in both maps, you can see large areas, large wooded areas. And in the in the right-hand map, I hope you can see that there's a blue line in the north part of the preserve. That's Tinley Creek. It runs through the site. So these are remnant woodlands. These are woodlands that we believe are more or less undisturbed by human activity over the course of the last 100 or so years. Tinley Creek Ravines consists of remnant mesic oak woodlands with ravine systems, floodplain forests, of course, adjacent to Tinley Creek, and as I mentioned, some reforestation areas and some old agricultural fields, including an old field prairie that does have native prairie plant component in it. We don't have a record, but I believe it was probably seeded by the forest preserves at some point in the 20th century and never recorded. Well, the current restoration project is in its final year. I'm just going to go ahead here and put all these little bullet points up. So we're in the final year of a 5-year restoration project that covers just about the entire site, which is 528 acres. This project was funded by a mitigation grant by the Oak Lawn Water Systems group, which is a consortium of 12 municipalities. They came to the Forest Preserve some years ago and asked us if we would allow them to put a new water main to serve these 12 municipalities through Forest Preserve properties. Of course, this is something we do not like to do or say yes to normally. But as it turns out, after some negotiation, we were able to come up with a plan that we felt was mutually beneficial and particularly beneficial for the preserves. If you look at these maps, either of them actually, but it might be most clear in the right-hand map, the contemporary one. There, can you see my cursor space by any chance moving
Yes.
in the
Yep.
screen? Oh, good.
Yes.
I didn't know. Okay, so this corridor right here is a long time ComEd utility corridor that has consisted for decades mainly of turf, grass, and weeds, with a very small component of old field prairie, very little native vegetation whatsoever, as well as a paved trail. We allowed the Oak Lawn group to install a water main in that corridor. So they basically excavated and disturbed area only underneath a previously disturbed utility corridor. They're almost done with the installation of that water main. They'll probably be finishing up later this year. But what we got out of it was, as I said, 528 acres of large scale restoration work. We were able to hire 2 different contractors because there was so much work that we did. We had to hire 2 different contractors. And let me show you, if I can move on here, what we've been doing. So this map shows in the yellow polygons the priority areas that we delineated at the beginning of the project. This 1 through 7. We didn't know how far the funds we received would stretch, so we prioritized areas based off of the remnant quality, the vegetative quality. But we were able to get to every unit actually. What we did is we removed invasive brush across all the woodlands, even including the reforestations, in order to eliminate any potential seed sources of reinvasion to the remnant woodlands in units 1, 2, 3, and 6. We also did canopy tree thinning across all of the woodlands. We had different specifications for every unit and even subunits within the remnant areas based off of some pretty extensive surveys we did before the project started. And that was to increase light levels to the ground. We also, if you see this sort of area 4 on the map, that's this old field prairie I was talking about that already had some native forb component. It also had been invaded by brush over the years as well. Haws, dogwoods, buckthorn, etc. So we removed brush over just about that entire prairie area. I think that's almost like 200 acres, something like that. We did leave one area intact with native, although very common haws as shrubland bird habitat. And then we were able to do 2 different kinds of seeding. In the old field prairie that had already been disturbed in the past and already had some native component, as I mentioned, we did an enrichment seeding that was made up of purchases of commercial seed of local origin to increase species richness, and we sowed that mechanically with contractors after the brush was removed and after a prescribed burn. The other sort of seeding that we did is we again hired a different set of contractors to actually do seed collection for us in the remnant woodland. And we had them collect seed, particularly of woodland sedges and grasses, as well as some conservative forbs that were already on the site, but in very low abundance and distribution. And then after last year's fall burn in the remnant woodland, we seeded this winter the processed seed. And in addition to that, there was also a small hydrological restoration project in the west side of the site. I don't know if you can see these blue lines here. This is one of the larger ravines where I'm putting my cursor right now. And this is another larger ravine here. At the head of this ravine, well, first of all, we also had Stantec, the contractor, do a hydrological assessment of the site, in particular, looking at the ravine systems and giving us any feedback. They put together a nice report about erosion issues. As it turned out, their experts did not feel that most of the ravines were experiencing anything abnormal as far as erosion goes. But there was one exception. This ravine over here was experiencing some flashy stormwater runoff from the adjacent residential areas. And so we did some mechanical regrading of the head of that ravine, put in some riprap in order to stabilize the banks of it. And there was also a small retention pond that was installed to sort of hold some of the flashy stormwater that was coming into the site and reduce the impact of the erosion into that ravine. But it was done in an area that was already a disturbed old field. So that kind of in a nutshell is the Tinley Creek Ravines project. Most of the tree thinning and the invasive shrub work was done in 2020, by about 2020 or into 2021. And then since then, we've been following up with woody resprout control. And of course, we've been continuing our prescribed burn regime that we had before the project started in place. This is just a quick picture of not the exact same area, but close to the same area before on the left and after on the right, directly after. And as you can see, the picture on the left not only has a greater stem density and a little bit shadier, but there's very little vegetation on the ground. Whereas the picture from the following year, you can see there's a little bit more light to the ground, and we're already starting to see a pretty decent seed bank response as far as herbaceous ground layer. There's actually something green on the ground in that picture. Okay, so the next project that I want to touch on that's going on currently is Thornton Lansing Road Nature Preserve. Now, Thornton Lansing Road Nature Preserve is at the edge of the Calumet region, and Lansing and Thornton, as the name implies. The picture on the map, or a picture on the left, kind of shows you where Thornton Lansing Road Nature Preserve is in relation to a couple other preserves. Jorgensen Woods is to the south of it. Wampum Lake Land and Water Reserve is to the north of it. It's just west of the I-94, south and west of I-94, I-80. Let's see. So Thornton Lansing Road Nature Preserve is a mosaic, again, of remnant black oak savanna, sand prairie, pin oak flatwoods, and also some adjacent areas of reforestation and an old ag field. That's almost the recipe of any of our sites, has some reforestation and old ag field somewhere on it. It's about 440 acres, and it's all now a dedicated Illinois nature preserve. The map on the left actually is from the relatively recent proposal a few years ago that added this additional 100 acres to the already existing Illinois Nature Preserve area. So now the entire site is nature preserve. It's one of our highest quality areas, not just in the Southeast region, but in the entire Cook County Preserve system. So relatively intensive restoration work has occurred in the remnant areas, at least since 2009. The map on the right here shows the northeast quadrant, or this area on the other map, of Thornton Lansing Road Nature Preserve, which is probably the highest quality part of the preserve, the most remnant part of the site. And since 2009, we've been burning regularly. We've been doing oriental bittersweet control across the entire 440 acres. And in that remnant area, a lot of concentrated control of glossy buckthorn, seedlings, reed canary grass, Phragmites, things like that. So this map on the right now, what these polygons indicate, this is a map of a project that we did that was funded by Sustain Our Great Lakes, a SOGL grant from 2016 to 18, along with several Calumet partners, the Nature Conservancy, Chicago Park District, Illinois Nature Preserve Commission, etc. And we focused on these 4 units first in the northeast part of the site, our highest priority, highest quality part of the site. And even though, as I mentioned, we had already done a good deal of restoration work, what we realized that we hadn't been able to do, and we felt was imperative to improve the health of the site, was to do canopy tree thinning. So as part of this project, we continued with invasive brush removal in areas we hadn't gotten to, like that unit 4. And then all of these units, we did some pretty heavy thinning, primarily of black oaks and pin oaks, which were the dominant tree throughout the entire area. And when we did tree surveys before the project and planning it, what we found is that the vast majority of the oaks throughout this area were about the same age, and they were very dense, and conditions on the ground were very shady. We do have some little sand prairie openings in this area, but those also were starting to get invaded by oaks because of previous fire exclusion, right? Before the last 20 years. And most of those oaks were about 60 to 75 years old. They were all about the same age. Very interesting. Anyway, so we were able to accomplish that, and I think we got good results. So that was phase one, the Northeast. Now, if you look on this next slide, the map on the left was our phase two project. Phase two was from 2018 to 2020, also a SAGL grant with the same Calumet partners. What we did is we moved our work into the area directly west of the previous project area. So if you see these green, blue, red, orange polygons, this is about an additional, I think, 138 acres, if I recall, 133 acres. Again, the same sort of work. This is an area where almost no brush control had been done. So we did invasive brush control and follow-up, and also canopy tree thinning. And in the wetlands, especially in this green area here, this is a naturally occurring freshwater marsh swale and sedge meadow. It had been pretty heavily invaded over the 20th century with silver maple and cottonwoods. We did a great deal of girdling and leaving in place silver maples and cottonwoods in that area. Okay, now to the current project. We're now in phase three, again with the same partners and also the same grantor. And the map on the right shows our phase three area in blue here. This is about 28 acres. We had originally put in a proposal to do restoration across the entire south third of Thornton Lansing Nature Preserve, but we didn't get the full amount that we asked for from the grantor, so we attenuated it to our highest priority area, again, directly adjacent to phase one and phase two. So trying to work in a logical and methodical manner. In this area, we are doing, again, invasive brush removal in the understory. In the upland mesic woodland to the west, we're doing canopy tree thinning that mainly consists of thinning out sassafras and pin oaks. In this eastern part, which includes a swale, marsh, and drainage ditch, we are doing some more heavy tree removal. We're actually doing something close to complete tree removal, because in those wet areas, the trees that are forming the canopy are made up of invasive, in this case, invasive silver maples and cottonwoods. So most of those are being girdled, some cut. So that's the current project, which has just begun about 2 months ago. And we'll continue with woody resprout control in the growing season here in 2023, and as long as it's needed, even after the grant is over, we'll obviously continue with that maintenance. Okay, so that's Thornton Lansing Road Nature Preserve. Now, as part of the same grant, it's a good segue into Powderhorn, we also put some money in the budget to fund the Nature Conserve, a TNC crew that works out of a staff crew that works out of Indian Boundary Prairie to sort of act as contractors for us to do some invasive species control at Powderhorn. So the map on the left shows Powderhorn and the natural communities there, which is Chicago and Village of Burnham. And the map on the right shows in yellow, that's the border of the preserve. And in red is a 16-acre area where the TNC crew started working last year and will continue to work into this year. So the main focus of the Nature Conservancy crew's work has been and will continue to be removal of purple loosestrife, free canary grass, and Phragmites in these sand prairie and wetland swales. They have also done both the very end of last winter when the grant started, and again this winter, just a few weeks ago, some selective invasive brush thinning in one of the swales that runs through this area. In this particular case, the targets are native shrubs that in this instance are behaving invasively, such as buttonbush and sandbar willow, and to a lesser degree, blue-fruited dogwood. As I mentioned, the 16-acre area. Okay, so since we're on Powderhorn, I'm going to try and touch briefly on the hydrological restoration project that's going on there. We did talk about this at the advisory committee meeting a couple months ago, so I'm not going to go into as much detail, but I do want to touch on that for anyone that didn't get a chance to hear that one. Okay, so just to backtrack a little bit, Powderhorn is a dedicated Illinois nature preserve. It's one of our highest quality sites in the forest preserves of Cook County. It's composed mainly of remnant dune and swale topography. The graphic on the left shows you in the orangey tan color, the sand ridges, and in the blue, the swales. It has, a recent history of ecological degradation, unfortunately, even though a lot of ecological restoration work has been put into the site over the last 10 to 15 years by volunteers and a series of different projects that have funded contractor work and conservation corps and intern work too. But despite all of the invasive species control work that's been done over the last decade or more, and the invasive brush removal and that sort of thing, we realized there was an underlying hydrological issue that was preventing us from, attaining our restoration goals. Of course, that's a picture of purple loosestrife, one of the more common invaders at Powderhorn. Okay, so here's a picture of a swale on the left that, as you can see, has been invaded by hybrid cattail. So we've realized that over recent years, these marsh swales that you saw in the previous map in blue were holding probably higher levels of standing water and for longer durations than we felt was normal or healthy for the site. If you look at the picture on the right here, it shows the whole site, an aerial photo, and all that blue area indicates the estimated extent of a flood event that was from, I think, 2019, something like that. Sorry, I'm looking at my cheat sheet here. Well, it was from a few years back. And the reason that the city of Chicago made this map is because there was a lot of flooding damage done to residential and commercial areas in the city of Chicago adjacent to Powderhorn. But it's also indicative of, just how high the water levels have been in recent years. And anyways, let me just backtrack. One of the results of what we feel these unnaturally high water levels has been is that certain species that can take advantage of those conditions, whether they be native or non-native invaders, have taken advantage of those situations, and the marsh swales and sedge meadows have degraded greatly as a result of this. In areas where we had a nice diversity of emergent marsh or sedge meadow, we're now seeing hybrid cattails, phragmites, buttonbush, or sandbar willows, right? All species that can take advantage of longer inundation periods of standing water and higher levels of it. Okay, so we were lucky enough to hire a hydrological consultant, Hay and Associates, some years back, and they did a hydrological assessment of the whole site for us, and they came up with a very nice report with many suggestions for how we could solve some of these problems, including plans for the designs of some sort of drainage or water control structure. And then in 2019, we started talking with Audubon Great Lakes. And then by, let's see, was it 2021 that we started, I think? Yeah, 2021, we won, or Audubon Great Lakes won a NOAA grant for us. And we've been working with them in implementing those plans that Hay and Associates put together for us some years ago. So what this looks like is the creation of a drainage structure with inline water control structures as well. So the map on the left is kind of like a blueprint from one of the plans. It basically consists of a series of 12-inch PVC buried drain pipes, as well as connected open air ditches that have been constructed, and some retention ponds too. There are also a couple of water control structures that I'll show you a picture of in the next slide. One occurs already here, and the other is slated to occur down here. So the picture on the right is basically the same thing, just in a slightly simplified format where I just drew a blue line in to show you where the drainage structure runs. This is the south end of Wolf Lake, and this is what we call the Harbor Point property that the Forest Preserve acquired relatively recently. This area is an open ditch. This is buried pipeline. This is buried pipeline under 134th Street. This is open ditch. It then incorporates the existing 135th Street marsh into the water control structure, the drainage structure. Then there's more buried pipeline here, and it goes under the Indiana Harbor Belt Railroad tracks and into Powderhorn. As you can imagine, some negotiation had to be done to get permission to put a pipeline buried under the railroad tracks. And there was another little hiccup that came up too that I will mention in a little bit. So the goals of this are to recreate a hydrological connection between Wolf Lake and the wetlands at Powderhorn, to create a fish passage between these two areas, to restore or create hemi-marsh in this Powderhorn Slough, or we sometimes call it the Powderhorn North Pool, which currently is about 2 to 4 inches deep of relatively stagnant water. It does, however, have moderately good submergent vegetation, but we have reason to believe that in the past it was behaving as more of a hemi-marsh. By hemi-marsh, of course, I mean, a wetland that is inundated with water for some part of the year And at other parts of the year, there are drawdowns, seasonal drawdowns, and you have mudflats and emergent above water vegetation, as well as inundated areas at the same time. Okay, so that's another goal, to restore the emergent marsh conditions to the swales within Powderhorn Nature Preserve proper, to improve and expand wetland bird habitat. And the added benefit is that this should improve stormwater drainage for the surrounding residential and commercial areas, as well as the railroad tracks. So here's a quick picture of the north end of the configuration. The picture on the left is the boat launch at 133rd Street, the south end of Wolf Lake, the Wolf Lake boat launch. That area of new asphalt is where pipeline has been buried. By the way, the structure is about 90% completed as of right now, but we've had a little bump in the road completing the last 10% or less that I'll explain in a bit. The picture on the right is a retention pond directly south of that in the same boat launch parking lot near 133rd Street. We incorporated a couple of retention ponds along the way in order to make the area more appealing to fish that might want to go from Wolf Lake to Powderhorn or from Powderhorn to Wolf Lake. They don't like to go through dark pipes for very long periods, apparently. I've heard from the fish biologists. And it also helps to aerate the water. That's just a picture of the drain pipe draining out into that retention pond. This is the ditch that we dug between 133rd and 134th Street. Looks a little bit better now. It's been seeded and revegetated. We created a meander, a bit of a meander, so there's a little bit of a riffle to the open ditch. This is the first of the two water control structures. This is just south of 134th Street. This big concrete box with the grading on top is one of the water control structures that will allow us to manipulate the water levels, we believe, based off of the modeling at Powderhorn, about 2 feet in elevation, up or down, compared to existing current water elevations. And this picture on the left just shows you one of these boards. So it basically consists of a series of these boards that you just pull out, right? If you want complete flow, you take all those boards out. If you want no flow, you put all the boards in. It's pretty simple. Even I can figure that part out as a non-engineer, right? Okay, so here's another picture on the left of that same water control structure. You can see that it becomes, again, an open ditch again. That was dug along the north end of 135th Street Marsh. The picture on the left is 135th Street Marsh. And then the picture on the left on this slide is the south end of 135th Street Marsh, where it then drains back into buried pipeline. The picture on the far right is that north slough at Powderhorn, where the inlet will be when it is completed. So the hiccup that we ran into that I had mentioned before is that there's also a BP natural gas pipeline. If you can see my cursor there, oops, I didn't mean to do that. That runs just south of 135th Street Marsh through our property, just north of the railroad tracks. And we thought we had an understanding with them. Apparently that was not the case. They came to us when we were getting ready to install that leg, and they wanted us to change our plans and make it deeper. than our specifications had called for, which would have altered the function since this is all grade and gravity, elevation focused. So we were basically put on hold for the last 10% for almost a year now. But luckily, I've heard that there was a meeting a couple of weeks ago with them, and it looks like they're going to grant us a variance to finish the construction. And we're hoping to get that in writing this week. And if that does happen, like it will, we expect that the entire project will be completed by the summer of this year. So that's it. Okay, so I wanted to also touch on, I see that I'm running a little bit late here, so I apologize for that. I want to touch on another project that again is a little bit out of the Calumet region, the Chicago Lake Plain at least, proper, but an important site in the southeast part of the Cook County Forest Preserves, and that's Sauk Trail Woods. Sauk Trail Woods is over 1,100 acres in size down in the Stager Sauk Village area. So it's right by the Will County border. It runs from about 26th Street down to Stager Road, the Will County border. As you can see in the map on the left, it consists of sites that are called Sauk Trail Woods or Sauk Lake Woods, Schubert's Woods, Kings Grove, and also some parcels that we own to the east of there that mainly consist of old fields and reforestation areas. But a great deal of this area consists of remnant upland mesic oak woodland, a very good quality, as well as floodplain forest. And as I mentioned, of course, the obligatory reforestation in old ag fields. So the current project is being funded by American Recovery Plan Act federal grant monies. And we're focusing on riparian woodland restoration in these red units that we've prioritized, as you can see in the map on the right here, from 1 to 7. We were able to begin work on this project this winter, and we've already completed units 7 and 8 and unit 5. So we're very happy about that. We were hoping that we'd have more frozen ground conditions this year, but this is a 5-year project. So we have lots of time, luckily, to complete it. And what we're looking at is trying to accomplish 247 acres of restoration work. In this particular project, we're focusing on invasive brush removal and follow-up of resprouts. And in addition to this, actually, let me see if I have another picture here. So this is just some pictures from part of this preserve. As you can see, there are some nice spring ephemerals there, rue anemone, bloodroot. Yeah, but you can see with the picture on the right, I just want to demonstrate that there are also areas that don't have very good ground cover and are pretty dense with invasive brush. What I also wanted to mention about this project that is that's unique is we are also using some of that ARPA money to fund a hydrological study of Thorn Creek from the Sauk Trail area all the way up through our properties at Glenwood Woods to the north and Jurgensen Woods and Brownell Woods within that Thornton Lansing Nature Preserve landscape that we talked about a little bit ago. And what we hope to accomplish there is to have, professional hydrologists and civil engineers and people with that kind of expertise try and delineate erosion issues for us and come up with various kinds of solutions and kind of like a hydrological restoration plan for the whole watershed, at least the parts of it that are in forest preserve properties. So we're kind of excited about that. Okay, now lastly, I'm going to kind of briefly touch on Beaubien, getting back into the Calumet region proper here. You know, Beaubien Woods is a 250-acre site in the city of Chicago, you know, just west of the Bishop Ford, just south of 130th by the little Calumet River, as you can see in the map on the left. Over the past decade or more, most of the restoration work that we've done at the site has focused in the woodlands and wetlands and little prairie openings on the east side here where my cursor is around Flatfoot Lake. But we have an interesting little project that has begun over the last year and is going on currently, where we're partnering with Open Lands and the Field Museum to do a prairie recreation. It started 2021. It's still going, as I said. And we've delineated about a 20-acre area of old field. This used to be mowed turf grass for many, many decades that the Forest Preserve Maintenance Department just mowed because it was part of this larger recreational area, but no one ever used it for anything. So a few years back or whatever, we asked them to stop mowing it, which was a slight improvement, but still was basically a patch of, you know, cool season grasses, non-native grasses, and a lot of weeds and very little native plant component. So in this project, we are removing brush from these yellow and blue polygons here and thinning out some invasive trees that don't belong there and to expand the area. And then we're going to be burning this area. We're going to have a contractor come through and do a herbicide application to kill off the turf grasses and the weeds. And then we're going to seed it with a native prairie seed mix and see what happens. And we hope to recreate some prairie, but there's more to this project really outside of just, yeah, I'm just going to speak really to the ecological restoration components, right? But there are many other fascinating things that actually Laura Milker could probably explain in better detail, but they involve things like the installation of a gathering space near the prairie restoration over here that's going to have some artwork, the creation of trails that will help to improve access to the site from the neighboring community, make it more welcoming, we hope. Some of that has already been done in the form of like a wood chipped trail through this area, which we're talking about maybe even in the future installing a more permanent, maybe even paved trail through this area here. We're recently going to be acquiring this property here as a grant from the city of Chicago. So we're thinking maybe a trail somewhere through here into the neighborhood, you know, things like that. Our planning and development department is making improvements to the boat launch this year to make that more usable and accessible, and we'll possibly be planting more shade trees in the dedicated recreation turf grass areas as well. And a lot of outreach programming with the Field Museum and our SEP department, our outreach department. So since we're pushing 8 o'clock, I'm going to stop there and open the floor up to any questions. Oh, let's see. I should check the chat, I suppose, first, maybe.
Can't hear you, Michael. You're on mute. Nope. Oh,
Okay, yeah, in chat there's a comment.
Okay, so I see. Thank you, Stephen. Yes, the trails at Sauk Trail Woods are very well used. I noticed very well used by patrons, joggers, walkers, bicyclists, dog walkers, birders, which is always great to see. Yeah, and yes, Lisa, right. So my current understanding is that the CTA line plan may have moved a little bit, but there's still going to be one in that area north of Beaubien, right? Um, so yes, it will improve the connection there. Yeah.
well, I can say on behalf of Cub Scouts, we are always glad to participate in the programming out at Beaubien Woods. So thank you, for that. And so we do look for lots of trails to hike on. So, sometimes the areas are really great, but there's no trail really to hike on. So like
Sure.
at Beaubien Woods, there's really not a real good trail. So,
Right.
right.
Yes.
I have a question, Dan. This is Mary Ann. How much work do you have to do with the surrounding communities for buy-in, or are they all happy with your plans? Or
Yeah, well, this is a question that I can only vaguely answer because I'm not directly involved with that aspect, but I can tell you that there is a great deal of work that has gone into community outreach and a lot of listening sessions with the community. In fact, if you don't mind me digressing with a little anecdote here, I just spoke to a gentleman who grew up in the area around Alkel Gardens, around Beaubien, I mean. And he's actually a high school teacher at Carver High School across the street currently. And he had some questions about some of the tree removal that's being done right now. In particular, there was one tree that had special significance to him personally and his family because he's known the tree for over 50 years. Anyways, I got a chance to meet him and look at tree and but what he told me, which was great to hear, is that he had participated. He was pretty well informed about the project, even though he doesn't live there anymore. But he is a teacher across the street. He was pretty well informed about what we're doing there, thanks to the efforts of the staff at the Field Museum and the staff at Open Lands, as well as our Forest Preserve Conservation and Experiential Programming Department too. All those folks have and are putting in a lot of effort to sort of activate, the site, make it more accessible, more welcoming and usable to the public. So yeah, I mean, I know there was one meeting I was at, I think last year, where we were looking at some of the properties around Beaubien that I alluded to the one that we were going to possibly get as a land swap with CTA. Now, I guess that land swap fell through, but aside from that, they are going to just give us, right, a piece of property that they're not using between Beaubien and where the residential neighborhood starts. And so, as I mentioned, we're going to put a trail through there. But anyways, when we were looking at some of those properties, not only did we have like, you know, administrative staff from the general office, you know, Arnold Randall and people of that caliber, but we had a lot of people from the neighborhood that had joined us for that site assessment. So I feel like we've done a pretty good job of trying to get input and buy-in from, you know, from the community, particularly that project. Yeah.
One other question. Thank you for that answer. So does the referendum that just passed help these projects on the south side a lot?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it does. Well, I mean, some of the projects, I mean, yes and no. I mean, most of the projects that I just touched on have already been funded before the passing of the referendum. So, you know, like the Beaubien project, that's a Walder grant. The Powderhorn project, that's a NOAA grant that Audubon got for us. You know, the Tinley Creek ravines, that's mitigation for the water main, you know, all these sorts of things. But that having been said, what it allows us to do is build upon an existing project. So just to give you an example, the Sauk Trail Woods project, that's being funded by ARPA dollars, right? But we're already planning to expand on the work that the ARPA dollars are going to fund with our own increased budget. So we're already looking at what is phase 2 and what is phase 3 and whatever in the future. So once all the invasive brush control is done, we're already planning where we want to do canopy tree thinning and where we don't think it's worth it, for instance, and that sort of thing. And, you know, once the hydrological assessment of Thorn Creek is complete, do we want to have a little pot of money set aside to try and maybe implement some of these suggestions we wind up getting from the experts? So
Thank
it
you.
definitely helps a lot.
Good. One final question. Eggers contributed plants to, was it a Thorn Creek restoration a few years ago? I was just wondering how that worked. Did that work out well, or?
Yes, well, you know, yeah, so those were those the
Were the blue
refresh my
fruited,
memory, the plugs, right?
yeah, these were blue fruited dogwood
Oh,
twigs.
those.
Yeah,
Oh, that was for Plum Creek,
Plum Creek,
was it?
sorry. Okay,
Yes, that was for Plum Creek. That worked out exceedingly well. So yeah, that's another project that I probably could have talked about, but
next time.
yeah, maybe next time. Yeah, Plum Creek is another fantastic site, which technically is outside of the Calumet because it's not on the lake plain physiographic, you know, geologically, but it's still a really good site and an important site. And what we did there a few years back with Friends of the Forest Preserve is we picked out a section of Plum Creek at the south end of the preserve. Plum Creek runs through the whole preserve, right? And there's terrible erosion issues, terrible channelization. It's so bad that you can stand in some spots at the edge of Plum Creek in the summertime and just watch the bank, literally watch the bank fall into Plum Creek. It's not a metaphor. Anyways, we picked about 100 meter or so length to try a little experiment in stream bank stabilization, something that we hadn't really done before. And through this grant with Friends of the Forest Preserve, we were able to have contractors regrade that length of Plum Creek. Again, it's just a portion of what runs through the whole preserve system, but it looks fantastic now. So they took this channelized, you know, 50 to 75 foot wall of death, of earth and roots sticking out, and they pulled it back, with large machinery, and then they regraded it with fresh soil, and they put erosion matting on, and then they seeded it with native seed and shrubs like the ones from Eggers. And you wouldn't know that it wasn't natural. Now, if you go look at it this year, you'd never know it was artificially done. It looks great. And they even created little like riffles and pools in some of the areas where it was just kind of straight, flowing fast. So yeah, that was a success. Unfortunately, we never had the opportunity to go back and do any more of the creek, but who knows now?
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? I now know what keeps Dan busy. That was amazing. And I just remember when you reconnected with Wolf Lake, we had a study in 2003 that actually it didn't, I don't think it went all the way down but it was very similar on the north end of it. And I think I talked with I brought that attention to someone that was working on it because there had been some similar work already done. So that was interesting.
Yeah, we've been lucky, like with our partnership with all the folks at Wolf Lake and the IDNR and the Prairie Research Institute, out of University of Illinois, the fish biologist there, and like Frank Veraldi,
Yeah.
Fish and Wildlife Service. Well, I mean, with the Army Corps, yeah, I mean, it's just been a wonderful group of people. Our own fish biologists. So many folks have contributed to that project. I think that's probably what's led to it being so successful so far.
Yeah, and Frank grew up in Hagwish and on the east side.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Right. So he knows. He's very familiar with it, and every once in a while he lets me know what's going on. But
yeah, it's great to have someone that has a long memory of an area too. Yeah.
Very good. Well, I just want to thank you for the presentation this evening. I just learned so much, and I want to mention that our next meeting in March, I think March 21st, there'll be an extended discussion on the Anthropocene, and that's the program that's at the same time as yours at Wild Things.
Well, I can catch it here instead.
Yeah, that's right, and at least Dr. Willing and Dave McGowan would be the two main presenters next March. We may include others as well. That will be awaiting you on March 21st. So thank everybody for coming, participating, and we'll see everyone in March then, okay?
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you.
Thank you.